Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the July Walk with the Doc. Today is the World Cup edition of Walk with the Doc. Last month was the New York Knicks version. So if you're not into it, I'll let you know the World Cup soccer tournament is going on now in the US and Canada and Mexico, and teams from around the world are coming, and all their fans are coming as well, bringing all kinds of excitement, all kinds of fun rituals the fans are doing, getting into the whole thing. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you're a big fan of World Cup soccer, recently, within the past week or two, there was up to 9 games during the day. You could be sitting there watching TV for 9 hours at a time. So the topic for today is, can sitting and watching the World Cup cause heart disease? So, we're going to split this into 2 parts. First is about World Cup and heart disease, and the second, more important thing, is sitting, being sedentary and heart disease. So, for the World Cup, watching the World Cup is doing the World Cup bad for cardiovascular health. And we know that there's lots of emotional stress with your team there, and exciting games and close games going on. So what's the data? There was a study out of the New England Journal in 2008 from Germany, and it looked at heart attacks in Germany during the 2006 World Cup when Germany was playing. When they were playing, there was 2% risk, 2 times more risk of having a heart attack than at other times during the year. 2 times higher. Germany's not alone. So there was another study out of England, and the risk for hospital admission for heart attack increased 25% during the day when England and Argentina were engaged in a close shootout. So we know that, or we can see that World Cup soccer, or soccer in general, really stimulates a lot of acute mental stress. And I brought up this study last time, but it makes sense this time around as well. Researchers for the study looked at sedentary people and active people, and they gave them an acute, emotionally charged event to try to stress them. And the event that they chose was a key soccer match, getting a lot of stress into them. And what they saw was that, we know that mental stress really increases vascular inflammation, increases the risk for cardiac problems. But the people that were sedentary weren't able to handle that emotional stress, that mental stress, as well as the people that were active. So that brings us to sitting. Why is it that being sedentary causes so many problems? So if you come to my talks, you listen to the news, watch the news, there's lots and lots of discussion about exercise and its benefits, but really the polar opposite of the sedentary lifestyle isn't much discussed. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So we know that sedentary individuals are at higher risk for heart disease. One recent study showed sedentary people are at 30% greater risk for heart disease compared to people that are active. And for each hour spent sitting, being sedentary, the risk for cardiovascular disease rises by 5%. If you're sitting and doing nothing for 10 hours at a time, the risk for heart failure and cardiac death increase even further. So what does that look like graphically? So on the second page, we have the graph on top. On the y-axis is cardiovascular risk. On the x-axis is physical activity. Being sedentary is here, all the way up on the top on the left. Being sedentary gives you the highest risk for cardiovascular disease. If you do 150 minutes of walking or any kind of exercise per week, it's 20 minutes a day, you go from up here to down here, the middle of the graph. So it's a huge drop in cardiovascular risk just doing 20 minutes a day. Now the one on the bottom looks at the relative risk for cardiovascular disease and cardiac death, that's on this axis, versus sedentary time on the y-axis. So sitting, an hour, 2 hours a day, not really much increased risk for heart problems. You get out to 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours, the risk just goes up exponentially for heart disease the more you sit. In addition to heart disease, being sedentary puts you at risk for diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, dementia, depression, even cancer. And why is that? So there was a recent study that was quite interesting, and it looked at being sedentary at the cellular level, the cells. And the cells of people that are sedentary weren't as efficient in making energy. The mitochondria, the mechanism within the cells that produce energy, just weren't as efficient in sedentary people and produced 30% less energy than in people that were active. It makes a difference because when we're active, we mobilize the fat, we get that moving, it gets put into energy, and off we go. If the cells can't metabolize fat, as they don't in sedentary people, the fat sits there and actually produce a lot of metabolites that aren't good, and that builds up and is certainly not good for us. Also, if the cells and the mitochondria can't meet the demand as energy rises, then the cells are inefficient, you can't meet the demand, you're short of breath, you don't feel good. And these cellular mechanisms are starting the body on a bad path towards metabolic disease, obesity, diabetes. So it's at the cellular level, at the single cell levels that they're starting this. And that's where the vascular demand comes in as well. Those cells just aren't able to handle that. So how do we define sedentary behavior? Sedentary is defined as any activity that is less than 1.5 metabolic equivalent, METs. The MET is the energy cost of doing any activity. We've talked about that before here. For example, walking the dog is 3 METs. Some other low energy activities are eating, 1.5 METs, washing your hands is 1.5 METs, sitting is 1 MET. Other interesting thing is that if you're active and you run 60 minutes on your treadmill in the morning and then sit at your desk for 8 hours, you're considered both sedentary and active. So even though you're running, you're exercising for 60 minutes, it's still sedentary because of all that. It's still sedentary because you're sitting all that time too. We'll get back to this in a minute. Now, when researchers try to figure out how much sedentary time people have, they can give out surveys, and people can say, oh, I spent this much time sitting, doing this, that. And it's very hard to gauge. But one thing that works well for sedentary behavior, as a proxy for sedentary behavior, is television viewing time. So maybe you eat dinner, you sit and watch TV for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and it's easy to quantify that. It's easy for you to remember that. Just keep in mind, sitting and watching TV is 1.0 METs. So it certainly counts for sedentary behavior. Again, many studies have looked at sitting and watching television and showing that that TV viewing is associated with an increased risk for high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, inflammation, heart artery disease, heart failure, cardiac death, stroke. Not good stuff. One thing that I saw recently that if you're very inactive, if you're sedentary as a young person, as an adolescent, an individual in their early 20s, if you're sitting and not doing very much when you're young, that increases your risk for heart disease as an adult. Even if you're not as sedentary and more active as an adult, that sitting time back when you're young translates into stuff that's not bad later on. And that's probably, again, at the cellular level. You're just not training yourselves to handle the energy and burning fat and everything. All right, so how much TV time is associated with heart disease? For perspective, the average daily time sitting and watching TV in the US is 5 hours per day. In Europe, Australia, Japan, it's 3 to 4 hours a day. So less, but still, pretty significant. Many studies have correlated the risk of amount of time watching TV with development of heart disease, and we'll do a couple of them here. One study, watching more than 2 hours of TV per day increased the risk of heart disease by 12% versus less than 1 hour a day. So just 1 more hour of watching TV increased your risk for heart problems. Just 1 hour. It's one show. Another study, there's an 80% increased risk of heart death watching more than 4 hours of TV per day compared to less than 2 hours. So watching 2 more hours increased your risk for cardiac death by 80%, which is enormous. Lastly, a third study looked at watching more than 6 hours a day. That increased the risk of dying from heart disease as well. And like being sedentary, they can correlate TV watching time versus the risk for cardiovascular death. So each 1 hour per day increase in watching TV increased the risk of heart death by 4 to 8%. And that's this graph, one in the middle of the page. That's TV time on the bottom, cardiovascular death on the side. And as you can see, as you started getting up into 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, the cardiac mortality just continues to go up. And if you look at that versus the sedentary time that we looked at on the other page, it looks the same. So the TV viewing time is a very good proxy. Now then, that begs the question, does exercise offset that risk of being sedentary? Can you do your 60 minutes of exercise and then sit for 6 hours? Well, there's several studies that look at moderate exercise and say that it can eliminate the risk of being sedentary. But not all those studies have shown that. Some have not shown that it's been beneficial. One recent thing that I found showed that 150 minutes of exercise per week reduced the risk for heart failure by 15% and cardiac death by 10%. That's good. Again, we're still not sure if you're going to be sitting for 8 hours, whether you should be exercising a lot, so much, how much. But here's a winning strategy. Walk more and sit less, watch less TV. It's going to be beneficial for you in the long run, either way. So enjoy the World Cup tournament. There's lots of exciting matches. But maybe instead of sitting and watching TV, you can walk on the treadmill or ride your stationary bike or do that Viking row. You've seen people doing that. So that'll keep you more active. And by the way, Norway, with the Viking row, plays England today at 5 p.m. So you can test your rowing skills during the game there. So thanks for coming out as always, and we'll do the next walk with the doc on August 8th. Thank you very much.